When you play the Game of Thrones, you
subscribe and like,
or you die. There is no middle ground.
Alright, hello guys, welcome back to the Grease Goblins YouTube channel, and today's video is going to be different. I mean, I've been doing some reactionary content on Saturday's videos, and I wanted to point out, I actually didn't know in the last video that we did with the Ned and Ashara Order of the Green Hand series, that was actually the last part I was going to do. I thought there was more than 2 videos to that series, and there was not. It was only just those 2 for their new and improved series. So for now, I'm going to let that go for now. And I feel like I've been bombarding you guys with content related to Jon's parentage. So I don't know, I kind of want to get away from it, even though I was going to have something planned for today that was on kind of the flip side, the other argument to that side of it, and looking at In Deep Geeks, R plus L, and who he thinks the parents of Jon are. But I didn't want to do that because for something I've done, especially for the first 2 reaction series I've done, I have leaned more into, emailing these people, or at least trying to get into contact with these people and asking if I can react to their content, because I think that's respectful. I know everybody doesn't like that, and some people aren't going to like people reacting to their content, so I want to make sure people are okay with that before I do that series. I've yet to get confirmation or not confirmation on In Deep Geeks video from Robert, so we'll see how that goes. You guys may see that series, you guys may not. I already have something pre-recorded. I was going to upload it today, but as of right now, I want to make sure I have something else to upload that day, unless that doesn't go through. So, today's video is going to be all about why did the first Blackfyre rebellion fail? Of all of the Blackfyre rebellions, it was the one that seemed the most promising. And I would go as far to say that the Blackfyres actually had the advantage at certain points of the war. That the Blackfyres really had the advantage for a lot of reasons. And when you come down to the fact that the Blackfyres actually lose the first Blackfyre rebellion, why was that? What happened to make that not happen? And who is at fault here? Is there one singular person we can look at and say, this is the reason? Well, I don't think it's that easy. It never is with George R.R. Martin's writings. So yeah, but before we get into the video, if you guys like to like, subscribe, and comment for more of this type of content, please do. We're almost at 3,000. So help us get to 3,000 as well. That would be awesome. We're going to be doing another Q&A for 3,000 subscribers, just for new people, if they want to ask me anything about my personal life, or whatever my thoughts are on theories, or any of that. But getting into it, so let's look at, I think, a couple of key characters during this time period. So we have Daron the Good. Now, Daron to me is a character that, if we did a whole separate video on why the Blackfyre rebellions even happen, and why the first one kickstarts everything, Daron is someone that I think is a little too merciful with Daemon, and I don't think he is someone that you can really point to as being, oh, this is the reason Daemon lost, because Daron just outsmarted him or did anything inherently that made the Blackfyre rebellions fail. And I would say there's a lot of things that Daron did that actually benefited the Blackfyres quite a bit. So I think Daron is a character that you do have to mention when talking about the Blackfyre rebellions, and especially the first one, his influence on it, because again, the reason that it happens, there's a lot to do with Daron, but he isn't really inherently to do with why they lost. So let's go to the next character. Again, staying on kind of the loyalist side, a lot of people would point to Bloodraven. Bloodraven is the character that reveals that Daemon is trying to take the throne. Again, we don't know if this is actually true. We're told that Bloodraven tells Daron basically that he overheard, or he had spies, or intercepted some letters, or he did something in which he found out that Daemon was going to make himself king. Now, Bloodraven could have been manipulating the situation, right? It could have been something as simple as Daemon saying, if things came to it, would you back me up? He could have been sending out letters at this point. He could have been doing things that maybe did not lead to treason and or him saying he's the king. But either way, Bloodraven is the person that kickstarts that. Now, was that going to happen anyway? Was the Blackfyre rebellions inevitable? I think the way Daron was handling it, yes. I don't think that, oh, if Bloodraven doesn't say this to Daron, that these events would not have happened. I think they 100% would have happened at some point or another. Very similar to the Dance of the Dragons, for instance. So, Bloodraven on that account, I don't think is solely responsible for the Blackfyres, say, losing. Because the argument here would be maybe the Blackfyres weren't ready yet. They were still in the planning phase. And Bloodraven kind of got, I guess, the jump on them. I don't really think that is true. I think the Blackfyres at this point had been preparing for a while now at this point for this inevitability of war. And I think Bloodraven kickstarting the war did, you know, it impacted them. But as we see with the war, it goes heavily in favor of the rebels early on anyway. So I don't think this is this major point that is the reason they lose the war either. So then we kind of skip forward to, okay, we get to the Battle of the Red Grass Field. Bloodraven is the person that ends up killing Daemon and his two sons, the twins, and is someone that inherently shifts the battle, right? Daemon being this character that dies is immense. It's huge. The figurehead for the entire Blackfyres is dead. But did that cause them to lose the battle? And I think if we take a look at the analysis of what was going on at this battle right now, the rebels were winning the battle to almost the end until we see what happens with Baelor showing up with the Dornish and some of the Stormlords. The battle was going really well for the rebels. At this point, when Daemon is killed, we see that the Loyalist vanguard and the center has fallen, right? They're basically almost falling back at this point. The Aaron vanguard, which is, again, the person leading the vanguard for the Loyalists, was an Aaron. That force is basically depleted. Like, they're almost in full retreat. It's kind of similar to, say, when Rhaegar gets defeated at the Trident. That kind of puts everything into disarray. Kind of how that was kind of going at this point, where Lord Hayford, who was the Hand of the King at this point, he was someone that had also fallen, which is huge because then that unit was falling into disarray. So for every reason, at this point, even when and after Daemon's death, the battle is still going pretty well for the Blackfyre cause. And again, we have to remember this is a battle, right? There's a ton of people involved. It's not instantly known that Daemon dies in the first place. So again, the battle was going pretty well. So I don't think Bloodraven, yes, as he was a major factor in the Blackfyre cause losing, he wasn't the sole reason. He was a factor, but he wasn't the reason. Now, Daemon himself is an interesting character to look at, because Daemon puts himself in the situation where he goes straight for the throat. He goes for King's Landing. We know as of right now, his campaigns had been going really well. We're not sure exactly how things went, but here's what we do know. We know that he had been winning battles in the Trident, and again, not specifically him. It could maybe have been him. It could have been Bittersteel. We're just not sure. Their forces were winning battles in the Westerlands with Lannisport right outside the gates. They were winning battles in the Golden Tooth. And also, for instance, the Blackfyres had a pretty good hold on the Reach as well. So things were going inherently pretty well. So going into this battle, did Daemon need to completely go for King's Landing, go for the throat at this point, or just gain more support? It's a debatable topic. I think Daemon, it made sense for him to go for King's Landing at this point. I don't think he was going to get any stronger, right? I don't think any of the major houses were going to side with him. And by major, I mean the Paramounts, the Lord Paramounts. So we have the Starks, the Lannisters, the Tyrells, the Baratheons, any of the big lords. They were all going to go to Daron's side, because Daron inherently is going to keep them at that role. The thing we see with the first Blackfyre Rebellion is a lot of these secondary houses trying to move up that ladder. When we look at, for instance, Aegon's conquest, the big thing we see is the Gardeners, right? They get taken out of Highgarden and the Tyrells take over. That's kind of what a lot of houses were doing during this point. The Peaks are someone that are very heavily involved in the Blackfyre, and we see a Peak that is even leading part of the forces for the Blackfyres. So again, it's a lot of the secondary houses. So again, I think it made a lot of sense for Daemon to try and attack now. The Dornish and the Stormlands were not together at this point. If they had won this battle before Prince Baelor showed up, things could have gone very differently. And so when I look at what was the reason that the Blackfyres lose, there's a couple. Now, the first one is Daemon Blackfyre was this character that embodied the idea of chivalry. He had been fighting the Corbray. I believe it was Gawain Corbray. If I'm mistaken, let me know. But they had been in a deep fighting that went on for an hour. I don't know if I believe that in a battle. I probably was much shorter, but maybe it felt like a long time. But we're told that they are fighting for a while, and eventually Daemon wins. And very similar to how we see Robert handle the situation with, say, Barristan, where he wants to get Barristan help, and he wants to get him healed to the Maesters. Daemon dismounts, so he's on the ground now, and he tries to help Corbray and get him help, sending him back to the back of their lines to get him help. At this point, he is then shot and killed, and as well as his twin sons that were 12, by Bloodraven. He is shot and killed, and both of them as well. So this is huge. If Daemon, and again, we have to remember at this point, Gawain Corbray and his forces, he had been kind of a reserve type force. Their line was breaking. If Daemon had just kept going, if he had not been chivalrous and tried to help him, I think it's actually very likely that we had seen the front lines for the Loyalists break. I think we would have seen a full-on retreat, probably. And here's the other issue. The reason that the Loyalists even hold is because Maekar takes the other part of the reserve, and he is the one that reinforces it. He holds it until Prince Baelor gets there. So again, if in this situation, Maekar wouldn't have been ready, right? Because it takes a little bit of time before Maekar actually reinforces that line. I think that line would have been broken. I think the battle would have been over at this point if Daemon had not dismounted. Again, shooting a target that is on a horse compared to on the ground is vastly different. Especially when Daemon wasn't really like in combat at this point. He was just kind of standing, you would assume, trying to, talking. And Bloodraven took his opportunity. Whether that was with magic or just his own skill with a bow. And that is Daemon's death. And that is a major blow to what was going on. So part of the loss and the reason the Blackfyres lose this battle and their first rebellion is on Daemon. A little bit of it is on Daemon. And it's his good qualities, being chivalrous, being that negative. And that gets him killed. Now, it's not all on Daemon, though. Because we see the other major figurehead we see of the Blackfyres, Bittersteel. So Bittersteel had been the rear guard for the army. So they were... So Bittersteel was in charge, basically, of, say, like a Tywin-esque, right? Where he's in the back, he's overlooking the battlefield. He goes where they need the most help. Or he is there to stop any forces coming behind their vanguard, right? And again, at this point, the vanguard is winning. They are doing really well. Even with Daemon's death, they are still pushing back the Loyalists. It's only when Prince Maekar gets there that kind of stops a little bit, but still, they're going to probably win. So what does Bittersteel do? He, one way or another, figures out that Daemon is dead, and he goes and fights Brynden Rivers, or Bloodraven. This was a bad move for a couple reasons. The first reason is it leaves the vanguard and the bulk majority of your army open to an attack from behind, which is exactly what happens with Prince Baelor showing up with the Dornish and Stormlanders. The second problem with this is he doesn't reinforce or attack what would have won them the battle instantly. And we see this a great idea of emotion and logic. Emotion dictates Bittersteel needs to avenge his king, his hated enemy in Bloodraven. The two have been battling over Shiera. They've had bad blood since they've been brought up. Of course we were going to see this duel. But the cost of Bittersteel's hatred and revenge is that now his army and the Blackfyre rebellion is going to fail. When you see two forces attacking one force in the middle, it never goes well. That's exactly what happens. The Dornish, the Stormlanders, they slam into really the vanguard. And what are you going to do at this point? You're trapped in. The battle's over. So if Bittersteel had been able to, again, put away his personal grudges against Bloodraven and all of the emotion that happened, maybe things go differently. But then Bittersteel wouldn't be called Bittersteel, and it wouldn't be in a Song of Ice and Fire story. because Bitter Steel could have helped the Vanguard and could have broken Maekar's lines and completely swept the battlefield by the time Baelor even got there. And then you're talking about a completely different story. We now have, again, your army fully ready, united to go against this new force that Baelor brings in. Or possibly Bitter Steel could have just kept going. If they had taken them out quick enough, could have proceeded taking King's Landing before Baelor even got there. So again, who is to blame for the Blackfyre Rebellion failing? And a little bit of it's on Bitter Steel, a little bit of it's on Daemon, a little bit's on Bloodraven. There's a lot of people you could put blame on here. And I think, to me, the first Blackfyre Rebellion is an extremely interesting point of history because it's an event that could have completely shaped Westeros. Going from there, I mean, think about it from this point of view. If the Blackfyres win, the Dornish, their future is really interesting because Dornish gets pulled in and they are part of the loyalist faction, right? The Dornish are directly involved with Baelor, who is right now the prince. He was going to ascend the throne right after Daron. Daron was married to a Dornish woman. So, again, the Dornish were not very liked by the Blackfyre faction. It's one of the key ideological differences between the two sides. How would that have gone? The Targaryen name technically would have died. Because you would assume Daemon would have kept the Blackfyre name, and we would have seen a completely different story. Would the world have been better with Daemon Blackfyre as king, as so many thought during this time? I think that's debatable. I think Daron was probably a better king, while Daemon was the better sword fighter, the better soldier. But let me leave you guys on a quote. Do you still believe that good soldiers make good kings? Again, a great little line there that we get about soldiers not always being great kings. In that regard, when we're talking about Renly and Stannis, Stannis probably would have been a better king than Renly, but we'll never know. So thank you guys all for watching this video. I hope you guys enjoyed this video about the first Blackfyre Rebellion. I want to give a little shout out at the end of this video. I've been really binge listening to History of Westeros, some of their older podcasts. They do a fantastic job. So for any of you guys that really like the longer podcasty style, those are fantastic. Give those a watch. Some of the information that I present here in this video, I took inspiration from them. But yeah, thank you guys all for watching, and I'll see you guys all in either the reread on Tuesday or the stream on Monday. Bye, guys.